Welcome, everybody. We're about ready to start the regular meeting of the El Segundo City Council, Tuesday, January 21st. We are going to start with some we're going to first start with an invocation by Pastor Rob McKenna from the Bridge, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance from Scott Nickel, Councilmember Nickel, and then we'll move into presentations. So may we have Rob McKenna, please?
I'll stand.
Everyone stand, please.
Let's pray. Lord, what an amazing night. Just walking into this room tonight, I just sensed joy. Lord, I'm so thankful for nights like tonight, Lord, celebrating life and achievements. Lord, that this room tonight is filled with parents and students, Lord. It's filled with administrators and teachers, city officials, police officers, firefighters. This is what makes this city so great. And so, Lord, tonight we give thanks. Lord, thank you for all that you do for us. Thank you for taking care of us and watching over us. Lord, thank you for all that you have put within us, Lord, to accomplish those things that you put before us. And so tonight we ask, Lord, that you would just continue to bless our city. Lord, bring wisdom and discernment to our city officials as they lead us. Lord, bring protection over all of our city, Lord God. Lord, watch over our police officers and our firefighters. Lord, thank you that you keep our schools safe. Lord, thank you for the hard work of those that keep our city clean and watch over, Lord, different aspects of all that you do in this great city. And so, Lord, tonight we celebrate life. We celebrate all that you give us, and we ask that you would bless it tonight. And we pray this in your name. Amen. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we're going to start with the presentations. We're going to start with the parade winners this year. Marcia Hansen.
I brought all my friends with me. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Perstek and Councilmember Nickel and Councilmember Pimentel. I'm Marcia Hansen with the El Segundo Chamber of Commerce, and this is Sheila Fowler, our chair of the board this year. We want to thank the city for all your help in making the 56th annual holiday parade one for the record books. It was one of the biggest parades we've ever had. It was a little rainy, but these guys put a smile on their face, and it was fabulous. So what a great day, and thank you all for being there and for your support of that event. And to Meredith Pettit and Jackie Day and the teams there, Beto, everybody at the city who we meet with for weeks and months ahead of time to put that parade on. We greatly appreciate their help. I really want to thank also our chamber members, all the events they support all through the year to help the chamber raise funds and whatnot, help support events like these. And we couldn't do it if it wasn't for every single one of our members. We want to thank them. And we have some sponsors we want to thank. Sheila?
Yeah. Okay, our sponsors. Chevron, City of El Segundo, Mattel, Edco, El Segundo Brewing Company, International Garden Center, Natural Simplicity, Prager Menace, Gelato Go.
Or Gelato Go, whichever. Stay here, Sheila. We also want to thank all of our volunteers. They're fabulous. We also couldn't do this parade or any of our events without them. So let's get on to the fun and excitement of the awards. We're going to start with our best performers. We have several ties this year. One judge went rogue and wrote in his own things. I'm not sure the people were even there he voted on, but y'all know who he is. We love him. But our best performers adult, Rusty, Frank, Lindy by the Sea. Come on up. Are you guys going to come down and do pictures? Pictures?
There are a lot of us, but they're all over at class.
Chamber receiving the award. Are we getting the? Oh, got it. Okay.
We're going to have everybody down.
Sure. Little bad guy. Yeah. There we go. Thanks, sir. All right. Everybody's here. Oh, I love it. Look at this. I love it. Here we go. 1, 2, and a couple more. And one more. Beautiful.
Back to dance class. You want to grab the award from Lynn? And our best performers adult, we had to tie the Dickens Christmas Carolers. Hello, 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 hello.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, all right, all right. I see everybody. I see everybody. I think I see everybody. I almost see you. Okay. Here we go, guys. And 1, 2, and one more. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. We have the best performer children's Kelly Irish School of Dance, Kelly School of Irish Dance.
Come first, come first. No, come first, come first, come first. For me, for me. Don't leave me flat. Here we go. A couple, and one more. Thank you.
It's like the key to the city right there. Our next group brought a lot of cheer to the holiday parade, the El Segundo High School Cheer.
For me. All right, guys, here we go. One more, and one more. Beautiful, thank you.
Our next group, the Best Holiday Spirit Children, El Segundo Co-op Nursery School.
You guys first. You want to come closer? Whoever works best for you. So we got this thing in the way. Wait. Hold that cuteness. Let me get some of that cuteness. All right. One more. All right, there we go.
How can you not smile when looking at that? So awesome. The Best Holiday Spirit Adult, this is the Civic and Community, Civic and Community El Segundo Auxiliary Children's Hospital for Los Angeles, CHLA.
Guys, couple photos, and one more, and just one more. All right.
I believe it's their 100th anniversary this year. Thank you, ladies, for all your work the last 100 years. Thank you. Best Holiday Spirit Adult Business Commercial, 1-800-GOT-JUNK, You Move Me and Has Away Today. Accepting the award for Drew Boyles.
Oh, no. Excellent, thank you.
This lovely group also won the Grand Marshal Award.
Have to have you at least one more picture. Where are the blue afros, guys? I'm missing the blue afros. All right, thank you.
Next, we have the Best Use of Theme, Children's EKO, Exceptional Kids Organization. Did Beth leave? Beth Murida? We'll skip ahead. Let's skip ahead. The Best Use of Theme, Children's, I love this group. El Segundo High School Robotics Club, the Potatoes.
Ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
One for me, hold on, don't move. All right, congratulations, guys. Here we go. And one more. All right, thank you so much.
Potato stands for People of Tomorrow Applying Their outstanding engineering skills. Potatoes. These guys are great. And we have the Exceptional Kids Organization here to accept their award.
Oh, we did not know about that.
Here we go, guys. And one more. Very good. Thank you so much.
Both of them.
We have Best Use of Theme, Adult Civic Community, El Segundo Rotary Club.
You go first. Go first.
All right. Wait a second. Where's the camera? All right. Smile, guys. Let's do this. One more. There you go.
Very good. Here we go, guys. One for me. And thank you so much.
Their float was Charlie in the Box from the Island of Misfit Toys. We have Best Use of Theme. You might have seen this group playing the incredible baby drum. El Segundo Brewing Company.
You've been waiting for it. All right. There we go. All right. Looking good. Here we go. One more. Thank you so much.
We might mention El Segundo Brewing Company was the official after-party spot of the 56th Annual Holiday Parade. The Best Musical Band Elementary, El Segundo Elementary School Band.
Here we go. Oh, lovely smile. Thank you so much for that lovely smile. Excellent. Thank you.
While the bands leave, we want to give a shout out to Linda Johnson at the Chamber. Nothing would happen at the Chamber if it wasn't for Linda. So thank you, Linda. We have the Best Musical Band Middle School, the Jane Addams Middle School Marching Band.
See on this side.
See, this is why you.
Oh my God.
No, I'm the proud principal.
Okay. I gotta see if I can do this. All right. I know. Here we go. 1, 2, and a couple more. And one more. Thank you so much.
All right, I think we have one more here. We want to thank the judges before we finish up here. The judges were fabulous. We always love having them help us. We couldn't do it without them. We have the best musical band in high school. It's the El Segundo High School Band and Color Guard.
Hi.
One more. Here we go. And thank you so much.
Did we get everyone? I think so. Thank you once again. We appreciate the city support. Tracy Weaver being in the parade for 468 years. You've probably seen her. And we couldn't do it without the city support. And on behalf of the chamber, we'll see you next year on the second Sunday in December. Thank you.
I walked right in front of the camera.
All right. Okay, so now that the chambers is cleared, we have two more additional presentations. We have the Invitation to the Library After Dark by Melissa McCollum, Director of our Library Services. Oh, Julie Todd.
Hi, good evening. So the library is really excited for this program. On Friday, January 31st from 7 to 9 p.m., we're going to have our first after-hours program at the library. And to kick it off, we're going to call it Music Icons, and it will feature John Van Hamersveld and Henry Diltz in conversation. And the moderator will be Stephen Peoples. He's a former record executive. So most of you are familiar with John Van Hamersveld's work, especially the DWP mural Tank Rat. But his previous career history began with record album covers going back to the 60s and 70s. Henry Diltz is the official Woodstock photographer, so he's photographed everybody from Woodstock and beyond. So between the two of them, they've covered a substantial amount of music's history in photographs and album covers, and it should be a real exciting event for everybody to participate in. Free to the public, doors are welcome to everybody.
And will it take place down in the
So we're actually going to host it upstairs in our new reading lounge. We're going to reconfigure furniture as we did for the author fair, so we'll have our program up there. So I have flyers to leave. I'll leave them in the lobby for anybody who's interested. Okay.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
And then our last presentation tonight will be by Chief Whalen and introduce one of our new El Segundo police officers.
Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. It is my pleasure to introduce our newest police officer, Officer David Perlich, to you this evening. And I know this is kind of a long-standing joke we have when I introduce an officer and I say he actually isn't a new head count, unfortunately. He's an entry-level officer, so we've already counted him in numbers that I've presented to you in the past. But I think it bears repeating that as an entry-level officer, Officer Perlich in December graduated the Riverside Sheriff's Academy. So that was 6 grueling months. It's actually a live-in academy, so maybe some might argue a little bit tougher, where he learned the basics of law enforcement. He was tested on all facets of it. Now he's in our field training program, which I actually would argue to you is more difficult in the academy because now that's where you have to take what you learn from the instructors and you have to apply it to real life. So he'll be with some great FTOs that we have for probably the next 4 or 5 months or so, and then we'll look forward to him being a solo police officer. So a little bit about David. He is an LA County native. He went to high school in Sylmar, attended various colleges in the area, such as College of the Canyons, Los Angeles Mission College, and Colorado Technical University. In 2005, Officer Perlich enlisted in the Air Force Reserve, and he was assigned to the 452nd Security Forces Squadron at March Air Reserve Base, where he is still serving and is a staff sergeant in the Air Force's Reserves. He has served in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, and he's received several awards and commendations from the Air Force to include the Air Force Achievement Medal, the Air Reserves Forces Meritorious Service Ribbon, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Air Force Expeditionary Service Ribbon, and he's also a small arms expert marksman. He's married, and they are expecting their first child shortly. So we're super excited to have David join our ranks, and I appreciate you allowing me to introduce him. So that's David Perlich. David, I'll allow you to say a few words.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I just want to say that I'm very happy and excited to be hired on here with the city of El Segundo, and I look very much forward to serving the people of this beautiful and amazing community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We'll get a photo.
Looking sharp, everybody. Here we go. Couple photos. And excellent. Thank you so much. For the PD. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Got it, thank you.
All right, that concludes our special presentations. City Clerk will do roll call.
Sure. Mayor Boyles, absent. Oops, I went forward. It's okay. Mayor Pro Tem Perlich,
Here.
Council Member Pimentel,
Here.
Council Member Nickel.
Here.
All right, now it's time for our public communications. Open for all input with a limit of 5 minutes per. If there's anyone here to speak and the ADUs, you can speak later when we bring up that item.
I'd like to speak.
Okay.
Hey, guys. So my name's Trevor Jones. I live in the city of El Segundo, as the city council already knows. They also know the topic on which I'm here to speak today, which is how the ongoing dispute with D.R. Horton has impacted my family. Okay, since we last spoke to the city council on December 17th, the following has occurred. Number one, we've received literally 0 updates on timing for when our home will be made available to us. This is accepting one text message from the city manager, Scott Mitnick, prior to Christmas that vaguely mentioned working towards a positive outcome. From where we sit today, we feel that text message seems to be misplaced. Number two, D.R. Horton now refuses to communicate with us other than offering to terminate our contract. We believe they've finally realized the legal liability their selling practices have created and will not offer information ahead of a forthcoming lawsuit. Number three, because we do not know how long we will be homeless, we have gone with the most temporary living situation available to us. Unfortunately, this means our family will be split up for the foreseeable future. I'll be staying in a spare bedroom with my aunt and uncle. My wife, Judy, will be at her grandmother's, and our son will be with his grandparents in Orange County during the week. We can see our son during the weekends, but it goes without saying this has turned our life upside down, despite being the option with the least negative impacts. As everyone on the city council already knows, we don't know how long the situation is going to last. I want to reiterate how baffling Judy and I find the situation that our family is in. We're baffled at how long it has taken to come to an agreement with D.R. Horton. It's taken longer than it has to construct and finish the entire development. We're baffled by the city council's advice of be patient and hang in there when they've taken multiple years to accomplish exactly nothing. We are baffled these units were allowed to be marketed months after the dispute with D.R. Horton was established, and we are baffled by our treatment as curious bystanders while we are the only people involved here having our lives impacted. The last time we spoke, Mayor Boyles made the statement that he had a city to protect. We left scratching our heads at the implication that the failure to act as a reasonable counterparty and the resulting litigation from a multi-billion-dollar public company somehow qualifies as protecting the city. We need the mayor and the city council to protect the part of the city that is constituted by our family, and we need the city council to check back into the real world where people act with accountability. What we need most urgently is an update that will let us move forward with some clarity. As the city council can probably surmise, we fully intend to protect our rights once the bogus January 29th estimated move-in date passes, and while our legal complaint is against D.R. Horton, the city should act with expediency to resolve the mess it has had a large part in creating. That's my statement, and I just want to say how unhappy it makes me that I feel that I need to be here to read that to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, that closes our public hearing. Public communications.
Mayor, just briefly, our Mayor Pro Tem. We are continuing to communicate with D.R. Horton, and just for clarity, the city has had no role in D.R. Horton's sale of homes, and we're not part of whatever transaction they entered into with this gentleman and his family. D.R. Horton does have an approved agreement with the city. They're seeking to amend that. That process has taken some time. We anticipate that coming back in front of the commission in February and potentially council in March. We are looking at whether there are interim options available to resolve the particular issue that the speaker and his family have, although I will say that different options were discussed during the holiday season, and those, and I don't want to get into the details of while we're trying to work out things amongst the parties. I don't think that's helpful, other than to say that we have been floating out different ideas and trying to see if we can resolve some of the interim issues, and we'll continue to do so. And that's what I would say at this time.
Okay, thank you. City Manager, are there any follow-up comments?
None.
Thank you. All right, procedural motions. In consideration of a motion to read all ordinance and resolutions on the agendas by title only.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consent calendar. Is there any polls on the consent?
I'm not pulling anything, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have none.
I'm going to pull number 11. Oh, so can we take a vote to approve 1 through 10 and 12 and 13?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, I wanted just to pull 11, adopt a resolution to revise city or observed holiday table to include the third Monday in February, President's Day. City Manager, would you just give a quick update on that item?
If you don't mind, I'd like David Serrano, our HR director.
Okay.
He can clarify there's no new net day,
Yeah.
but
So the question is it net neutral?
This item is net neutral. What we did is just a cleanup item. Back in 2007, the City Council did authorize and approve an additional holiday, but in the table that staff brought before the City Council at that time omitted one council day, or one observed holiday. So this just clarifies that that observed holiday was not deleted in 2007, and it still remains as part of our observed holidays.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'd like to move to approve item number 11.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All All right, moving right along. Public hearings. Item number 14, introduction of proposed ESMC text amendments related to accessory dwellings units to all resident zones. This action is statutory exempt. Do I have to read the whole thing? Do I need to read the whole thing?
No, it's on your script.
Sorry. I'll move to my script. So item number 14. This is the time and place hereto fixed for a public hearing regarding the introduction of proposed ESMC text amendments related to accessory dwelling units in all related zones. City Clerk, was proper notice of the hearing given in a timely manner?
Yes, it was.
City Clerk, has any written communications been received regarding this hearing matter?
Yes, it has been.
The public hearing is now open. Mr. Mitnick, who will make the presentation?
Our Planning and Building Services Director, Sam Lee, and our Planning Manager, Greg, is with him. So.
Good evening, Council. The main part of the presentation will be done by our Planning Manager, Greg McLean. Before he gets started, though, I wanted to provide a brief overview. The ordinance before you is to revise the city's existing accessory dwelling unit, commonly known as ADU law. As you know, Governor Newsom is committed to adding 1.3 million additional housing in California. Well, where are all these housing going to come from? It's coming to us from many fronts, including our R1 and our other residential zones. In 2016, state approved several bills that impacted housing. Intent was clear, to remove local control over residential uses. In reaction to state mandates, Council approved the first ADU ordinance in June of 2017. Council tried to protect some of the elements of our residential districts, elements like no garage conversions, owner occupancy requirements, and the like. Well, in October of 2019, Governor signed a new bill, AB 881, which took away many of those restrictions. Again, we're mandated to have an ordinance that complies with state law. This ordinance does that. And I also wanted to point out that the ordinance was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. So with that, Greg.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm going to go through some of the specifics of this proposed ordinance, starting with the various changes that this law introduces. The first one is garages are now explicitly permitted in as conversions, as well as other accessory structures, and by that they mean just about everything. So garages, rec rooms, or offices, and whatever else may be there. Our response is then to remove the prohibition that we had written in the prevented garage conversions. The other things were already allowed. The next one, garage conversions no longer require replacement parking. In the 2017 law, the state allowed us to require parking that was lost in the conversion of a garage. Well, we didn't have garage conversions, so it didn't really matter to us, but they took that away nonetheless. So we just removed the language that about replacement parking, or if it was there, and otherwise just comply. The next one is correction of nonconformities cannot be mandated for a conversion ADUs. So if you have a let's say a garage that's 2 feet from the property line and you convert it, we cannot say, well, the setback here is 5 feet. You got to move that garage. Can't do that. So what we've done is we've added the language to make this clear that we will abide by that, because that's what's required. They introduced a 60-day limit to process ADUs. This one's not really a problem for us. All of our ADUs, just like all the other forms of housing, are approved pretty much over the counter, and none of them require Planning Commission or City Council review unless they have other extraneous applications. ADUs will probably never have that problem, so that's not going to be a problem. Owner occupancy of the property may not be required at least until through 2024, and that's written in there. So in our ordinance we said, well, we removed the owner occupancy requirement, but we also wrote that beginning, I think it's January 1st of 2025, we'll have it back. So it's in there both ways. They introduced a new concept, the junior ADU. A junior ADU is It's a small, obviously smaller ADU than the senior ADU. It can only exist in certain circumstances. So when there's a detached senior ADU, they can also have a junior ADU inside of the house. Now, junior ADUs are limited to 800 square feet, and you can only have them if you already have the senior ADU. That's the only way you can have two. Otherwise, everybody's limited to one ADU. So we added a chapter to deal with that. ADUs are now also allowed in the multifamily zones. This is an area that I suspect there will be a need for a lot of clarification. The state has outlined 3 methods whereby you can have ADUs on multifamily. One is every multifamily lot is entitled to 2 detached. If you left any room available, you could do that. Another is to convert uninhabitable spaces. So rec rooms, laundry rooms, boiler rooms, or whatever, all of those can be converted now. And the last is that 25% of the units could also be split. So we've added the language to comply with that. That's all new for us. Next, ADUs may not be used as short-term rentals. That's actually in the state law, so we don't even have to deal with that any longer. But we included the language anyway.
Is that
Yes.
newly constructed ADUs or any ADU?
That's one of the questions we need to explore still.
And it attempts to regulate that by saying the lease can't be less than 30 days.
That's right.
Does that have to put in any covenants about what the termination is? Because sometimes we've seen on the short-term rental side of it that people will put in a 30-day lease, but there's no penalty for terminating the lease early. So do we have any insulation from that attempted loophole?
Not in this ordinance. That's something that we would probably want to take up in the short-term rental ordinance, which is coming back soon.
For the multifamily with if someone's going to convert a boiler room, we don't have any ability to enforce code restrictions on that. If there's not can we enforce a window put into a boiler room?
Yes, we can. We can enforce the building codes on those. And so they have to comply with the building codes that apply to habitable spaces. So it's an option, but only if it's possible.
If I might, just, there was a provision in one of the draft bills that there was like
You couldn't enforce
there was a grace period.
Yeah,
and
like
it went around
length.
between-
It was like 9-month grace period, right?
Well,
enforcing code.
at one point it was 10 years, and went to 5 years, but there was a grace period on building code compliance, but that didn't make it into the final round, thankfully.
So actually, on the question about the ADUs not being used as short-term rentals, so what happens if they can still do the main house? Like, so we, as the ADU, and then live in the AD, the person could live in the ADU?
Do you mean live in the ADU and rent out the short-term rental in the house?
What does that?
Well, you found the loophole. Most of these things will have some way to make them work. I didn't try to imagine all of them because the public collectively is a lot cleverer than we are. And we'll find them and we'll address them if they become a problem, but technically that's not a problem pursuant to the law. You can still have a short-term rental in your house unless we stop it.
Is someone required to seek a definition difference between a junior ADU and a space they would intend as a short-term rental? Is there something they have to codify to make, or is that just a lease duration?
The definition in the state or statutes is lease duration. It's the 30 days. Same with our ordinance in the short-term rentals.
And then the question is, with these houses that build these ADUs, if it's like a separate unit, it almost becomes a duplex. So does that mean now they fall under the new state law for rent control?
I do not believe so because the state defines these as accessory to a single-family dwelling in those cases. But for all practical purposes, they are duplexes, except they just, by law, they're still managed as single families.
That's a good question under AB 1482, because if it's more than a single-family resident, then it's subject to those rent control laws, and that is a very good question, and there's an argument both ways, I suppose, on that. On the short-term rental issue, that will come back to, I mean, currently city doesn't technically permit short-term rentals, so that issue will come back in front of you in February, and I think the key from this is that that Sacramento doesn't want these ADUs to be short-term rentals because then they're not really adding anything to the housing stock. And they haven't taken a position on short-term rentals generally, although that wouldn't surprise me if that's not coming, because the intent of including short or housing stock can be taken away by short-term rentals. And so that's probably another good reason we have a pilot program that we're putting out there, because the state could very quickly change the rules on us and require that anything that was a short-term rental be replaced by another unit. So it's kind of a wait and see as to what they do next.
For the public edification, though, these strictures in AB 881, do they pertain only to newly constructed and converted ADUs?
AB 881 reiterates most of the law as it exists, so they cover everything. A lot of the new restrictions are like you said, but everything was just repeated verbatim if they weren't changing it.
Well, particularly as it pertains to short-term rentals, if someone has an ADU now that they're
Right.
using for short-term rentals, are they suddenly going to be precluded?
Yeah, that's the question that I believe Councilman Nickel was asking. At least that's how I understood it. I don't know the answer to that. I think that's probably one of those areas that cities are reaching out to HCD for clarification.
When the short-term rental issue comes to the council, if the council wants to preclude ADUs, all ADUs from having short-term rentals, you can.
Well, I suspect my question is, if you have let's say you have a junior ADU, you've declared that the guest bedroom it's got a kitchen and it's got a kitchenette and it's an ensuite facility, and that you're counting that as a junior ADU with an external door that locks and enters, can you no longer rent that out? If you've been renting that previously as a short-term rental, are you now foreclosed from doing that because your minimum rental time for that is 30 days?
I believe it's safe to say that because it is an ADU, a junior one though, it would be precluded.
If it was built, if it's after January 1 of this year, yes, it's precluded. If it's prior to that, it's going to be a policy call by the council.
And is it up to us to decide if someone has a junior ADU? So if they have a detached ADU, is it up to us to say, well, you have that thing and you want to rent it, so for us that's a junior ADU, your minimum rental time is 30 days?
Well, currently, the junior ADU definition just came out for this year. Now, it's possible that people, based upon what they built in prior years, there could be some things that fall under the junior ADU definition. I don't know if that's...
Well, actually, it's a bit of a technicality, but there were no junior ADUs prior to January 1st because there was no definition of what it was. Now, in those cases, I think you would have to consider that a conversion. But once somebody goes through the process of making it an ADU, whether regular or junior, then short-term rental should be prohibited, I believe. And if it's not, we should make that explicit.
Because it's not up to the property owner to declare a definition of what they have, right? It's on us to fit it and say, wait, we define it as this?
In a certain way, they do, because you can't have a room addition with a kitchen and a lockable, exit entry, and sleeping facilities and everything else in its own bathroom. But with an ADU, a junior ADU, you have all of that. So they would have to go through a process of making all of those things permitted. So in that sense, they kind of declare it to us. And it will be recorded in our logs, in our record books as junior ADU from that point on.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Plenty. I was going to let you finish first. Hold. I think the public hearing will be open,
Yeah.
after the presentation.
Okay, there's also new limitations on utility connections. This gets fairly technical. We've included the language that the state law says. Some of the highlights, if your ADU is under 750 square feet, I should say it also includes impact fees, I'm sorry. We cannot charge impact fees. I believe we can't even charge the connection fees. There's when it's larger than 750, everything is proportional to the size of the house. not the ADU, but the house. So if you have a very large house, you can get a break on your fees because it'll be small in relation to the house. If you have a very small house, you'll pay more. So we're trying to figure out a way to make that more fair, but that's what the law says right now. And we'll probably come back with a proposal for a fee structure that would satisfy the law in the future, but also be fair. Okay, so moving along. So what's the difference between what we've proposed in this ordinance and what the law says from the state? There's one really significant difference, and that is that we're also limiting the aggregate total of all detached accessory structures to 1,200 square feet. The idea here is that if you can have a 1,200 square foot ADU, that's great. That was in the original version that we passed in 2017. It's in the current version. But if you already have a 600 square foot rec room and you have a 400 square foot garage, now all of a sudden you're up to 2,200 square feet. So we don't want that to be the case. That's just a little bit too crowded for the properties. So we put a cap at 1,200. There's also language in there that says explicitly that we would not prohibit anyone from having an ADU up to 850 square feet or 1,000 square feet for a two-bedroom. So that's sort of the fallback position. But the other thing is that's not clear, and I suppose we should probably get a clarification on this too. We're not allowed to prohibit through any kind of our actions or ordinances an 850 square foot ADU, but it doesn't say that they're entitled to an 850 square foot detached ADU. So we have to get clarification on that. But for now, the 1,200 square foot cap on all accessory structures kind of removes that problem from the table. So typically, garages are about 400 square feet. We've only allowed detached accessory buildings at 600 square feet. So that leaves 200 square feet. Of course, they can convert one or the other or both, and they can achieve their 1,200 square feet that way. Any existing structures that they have can be converted, of course. So if they're already over 1,200 and they want to convert without adding anything new, we'll allow that. So I'm going to give a couple of quick examples. This is the example of a detached ADU. So we have a 4,000 square foot house. It's a little big, but 400 square foot detached garage and a 600 square foot rec room. That's the example I just gave you. The maximum size of an ADU would be 200 square feet without conversions. Okay. If they converted, I'm sorry, I put office in there, should be rec room, they can get up to 800 square feet. If we just went with what the state law says, they could get 1,200 and they wouldn't have to tear anything else down to get it. Okay. Here's another detached example. The same house, the same rec room, but the maximum size of there's no garage, it's a detached garage. The maximum size of the detached ADU is 600 square feet in this example, according to our ordinance. However, if they were to, again, I missed it, if they were to convert that rec room and then add 600 square feet, they could achieve their 1,200 square feet that way. So we have this restriction, but I'm just trying to point out that it's not so restrictive that it should create a problem for the state. And I'll explain why the state matters in a little bit. Again, if we went with just strictly with state law, they could get a 1,200 square foot ADU and still have that 600 square foot rec room, 1,800 square feet. Here's a different example. We have the same house. We have a 400 square foot detached garage with non-conforming setbacks, and the maximum size of a detached ADU is 800 square feet without any conversion. But if they did convert, the important thing here is that those setbacks are safe. Even if they tear down the building and build right back in the same foundation, that's okay. Normally under non-conforming codes, if you tear down the building, you lose that right. But it's very clear in the state law that ADUs don't follow that. And the last example is just to show you how a junior ADU can work. So we have the 4,000 square foot house. They have detached 1,200 square foot ADU. So they're entitled to a junior ADU up to 800 square feet if it's inside the interior of the house. Okay? That's the only way you can do it. If you have a detached ADU, you can have a junior ADU in the house. Yes?
So just in this scenario, I have a big 4,000 square foot house with an attached garage. I have a detached 1,200 square foot ADU. I can convert my attached garage into my junior ADU.
No, The junior ADU is only allowed when there's a detached ADU for the senior.
You just said there's a detached ADU.
Yeah.
So now I'm saying my garage is attached. It's inside the house.
Right.
So why can I not convert my garage into
Oh, you mean convert it to the junior? No, you can. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood because okay, I got questions, but you finish.
Yeah. No, I thought you meant like a third ADU.
No, yeah.
You're right. You can convert the garage in that scenario. Okay. Again, you can't have a junior without the senior ADU. So that's pretty much a summary. There's a lot of details that I can help answer if you have those kind of questions. But let's talk about the next steps. These ordinances must be sent to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for their review. The state, well, if we don't send it to the state and they approve it, then we follow state law, which means we won't have our 1,200 square foot cap. HCD will then certify our ordinance that it complies with the state laws, essentially 100%. And if they do, we're good. We'll follow the ordinance. And if they decide that we're not in compliance, they'll give us 30 days to fix it. So hopefully I won't be back here doing this, a couple months from now to fix something. At any time, though, that our ordinance is either suspended or voided by HCD, we revert to state law. Okay. So there's a summary of all the provisions, but that concludes the main part of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I got a couple.
Sure.
So I want to understand the rationale behind punishing those with detached garages.
How do you mean by punish?
Well, in the scenario you just presented, that I offered my question about converting the attached garage into a junior ADU, you essentially can have upwards of 2,000 square feet of ADU if you have an attached garage.
Yeah, that's true.
And
well, it doesn't have to be in the garage. You can still have that.
But just play it with me.
Yep.
But if you have a detached garage and you want a detached ADU, you're limited to either 800 square feet or converting your garage and having 1,200 total.
Yes.
Whereas prior to, you were allowed to have a 1,200 square foot ADU besides your garage. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm following along properly because, this has been a subject matter that I've been party to for a long time, right? So the first go around, and I want to say that the core concern from my time on the commission and then my time here was how do we try to disincentivize people from converting garages?
Yeah, that's going to be very tough now that it's very explicit in the law, and everybody knows it, unfortunately.
Correct. But the way it sets up now is it's...
I know.
For the detached, somebody who has a detached garage, because if you remember correctly, the first ordinance, when it came out of the Planning Commission did not want to allow, an ADU to even be attached to a detached garage. And then they finally said yes. But so someone with an attached garage was at a clear disadvantage. Because they weren't allowed a detached structure. Council then changed that and said, no, detached, attached, whatever you want to do. We're not going to say that if you have a home with a detached garage or an attached garage that, the rules are different for you. Whereas in this scenario, it definitely changes those rules.
Well, the state law sets it up such that there's an important distinction between the attached and the detached ADUs. But going to the core of your question, it really comes down to a choice. Either we allow people to have, say, 1,800 square feet of accessory structures on their property, or we can settle on a 1,200 square foot cap in order to keep it from getting out of control or getting to be basically a lot of building and not much open space between them. It's a policy decision, and that's something that can be changed.
So humor me for a moment because you've been party to these conversations as well for a while. Am I wrong in stating that a lot of the concern was also the number of cars that we would be adding to street parking by adding conversions?
That was a concern, absolutely, yes.
Right, that was a major concern.
Yes, it was.
So again, what's being proposed before us, it incentivizes somebody with a detached garage to convert that garage or to only have an 800 square foot ADU. Eliminating that covered parking.
Yeah, you could see it that way. That's true. But again, the trade-off is, do you want to allow upwards of 2,000 square feet of accessory structures. That's the question. So we are offering this on the assumption that, garages are on the table now anyway. And most garages are, honestly, are probably used for storage of other things but cars.
Well, because my next question was also, is there any, I was trying to read through this again because I didn't catch it the first time. There's no stipulation for limiting the size of the ADU based upon FAR, correct? Did the state eliminate that?
No, there wasn't necessarily in there. There was one of the bills that didn't pass, I understand, was going to exclude them explicitly from the FAR calculation. I don't know what happened to that particular bill, but I suspect it'll come back.
So we're still capped at 0.6.
So we're emphasizing the accessory part of the definition and not including it.
So 0.6 is still maximum?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a detached garage, is that counted into your FAR?
No.
And an attached garage, is that counted into your FAR?
Most of it does not. There's a portion of it that does.
Right, like 400 square feet of it does not, anything over that.
I think 500 square feet was the cutoff, so most two-car garages don't count at all. Three-car garage, you get 2.5 spaces would be not counted, the last half space would be. And if you have extra room for laundry, water heaters, etc., those count.
So if I can, so to this proposal with a detached garage, that 20 by 20 square in my backyard that's currently not counted towards my FAR, if I'm limited to an 800 square foot ADU, but if I convert my garage, that 400 square feet that was my garage is now counted towards my FAR, correct?
Yeah. However,
and I can't add now another garage to replace it?
No, because a garage, strictly a garage, is not included in your FAR anyway, so you absolutely can do that. The other thing is the FAR limit is 0.6, but if you achieve something higher through the conversion of a structure to get an ADU, then you can surpass that a little bit.
But so I guess, so if somebody wants to loophole the system, I convert my existing garage and then I build a new garage and I'm still covering my lot with detached structures of whatever my house is plus the 1,200 square foot ADU if it's allowable by FAR and my new 400 square foot 20 by 20 garage.
It's an interesting idea. I think that it would be safe to say no, but I think we also want garages rather than just see them all go away. So maybe we should write an exception into that.
I think that's where I'm kind of heading in this line of questioning.
Yeah.
I'd rather us talk this out and figure it out, just because when I read it and I was thinking about it, I'm thinking, okay, well, if you're going to, like, I don't want to get rid of my garage, but now you're limiting my ADU, so you're essentially, for someone that, say, is keen to these new regulations and is in the housing market, a house with a detached garage is now worth less money. Because I want a garage, but I want a 1,200 square foot ADU. So I'm going to only look at homes with an attached.
But does it only count if you convert the garage? Like, if you don't convert your garage, you can still build the 1,200 ADU?
Not if it's detached.
If you
Not if that garage is detached. You're limited to an 800 square foot detached ADU.
That's how we wrote this, yes.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, do you understand? Because one thing that we've always tried to do from a policy-making standpoint is never to make policy that,
changes.
It immediately changes things.
One of the issues here, this was not done by the city, was and to me it's illogical, but the state, when it changed the law, it said that they actually made it incentivize converting garages, because if you build a detached structure, new one, you can be required to add a parking space for that. However, if you convert your garage, you can eliminate your existing parking for your existing structure and not build a parking space for the accessory dwelling unit. I don't understand the logic behind that, but that's the way it came out. So that makes this all very difficult from our perspective of how do we, and I'm not saying we can't, it's just a very odd set of rules they set at us.
I guess I have another question too, because now I'm going down a rabbit hole in my brain. I have a detached garage, which means that I have at least a 10-foot wide driveway going back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I convert that garage as part of my ADU.
Mm-hmm.
Can I now build my house over my driveway? Or do I have to continue to establish that 10-foot setback for a driveway to a garage that no longer exists?
Because the state does not allow us to replace the parking, and previously they said that parking could be on a driveway, I'd say that the driveway doesn't count as a driveway anymore if there's no garage.
So again,
yeah.
a reason to not incentivize somebody to convert their detached garage, I would say, because now we're eliminating the off-street parking, again, if they're able to then build over their driveway.
All of this is true. However, in the observation of how these things have developed, especially in El Segundo, the first thing to note is that a 1,200 square foot ADU is a very large ADU. That's the size of this room. That's 1,200 square feet. It's 30 by 40, I believe. So we're not seeing a lot of those. We are seeing a few, but the vast majority are coming in at like 600, 800 square feet. So even though the scenarios that you're presenting are possible, they're probably rare in relation to the vast majority of them. And again, the other consideration was the trade-off. We think that it's probably better, and this is just our recommendation, to have less massing on the back of everyone's property, fewer structures, than to worry about the garages when they're already incentivized by the state to convert those garages. So that's the reason why we chose this path, but however, as I said before, this is a policy decision. If you want us to change these little aspects, I don't think it would have any bearing on whether or not the state would accept this ordinance.
Thank you. No further questions, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have just a couple. Some of these are a bit rabbit holey, though, but pertaining to the parking issue, if a street was a permit parking street and someone converts the garage to an ADU, are they required, would they be required to give that renter a permit, a parking permit?
Well, that would
Well,
depend.
it seems like we could, given that, I'm playing off the transit orientation of this, conceivably, we would be renting to people who have no place, not, even if they brought a vehicle, would not be able to park it.
It's possible, but it would depend on how the parking permit system was set up. If every residence of any kind is entitled to a permit, yeah, you're going to create a big problem. If you limit it to one per property, maybe not so much. If you have a scarcity and you have fewer, and then there's some process to figure out who's lucky to get one, then it won't be a problem at all.
In 2025, when it mandates owner occupancy, we exempt land trusts. So we have a significant percentage of properties here that are held in trust. There is no requirement. Those in theory could be a series of a tripartite rental in kind of perpetuity, right? Or am I reading that correctly?
I'm not exactly following your question.
Oh, so 2025 is when we say there has to be an owner-occupied aspect to
Right.
these. We exempt in the ordinance properties that are held in trust,
Okay.
Which a significant number of properties here are for any number of incentives. What happens to those properties at that point? Is there a reason we exempt those properties? I mean, beyond the fact that there may not be a principal, or would we want someone who is a party to that trust to have to live there if they're going to have ADUs?
Well,
An officer of the trust.
Any that are built in the interim between now and then would be grandfathered according to the rules now, so they would not be required to live there unless the ordinance were amended to explicitly require that for all ADUs going back to the beginning. The exemption for trust may be just because there are so many that are, I didn't actually insert that language. I'm not sure where that came from. It may have been in the state law, but I think that it's, you would not believe this state law. It's very long and complex. I didn't see it in there, so I suspect it may have come from somebody else who reviewed this. So I'm sorry I can't answer that directly.
City Attorney, do you have any sense of what the wisdom of that may or may not be, besides
Yeah.
the complexity of trying to track down parties to a trust to make them live there?
Yes, and this deals with the interim situation, and I'm looking for that section at the moment. I apologize. Where can you, Councilmember Pimentel? Where are you?
My sea of highlights. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
I think it's on page 12 of that section. 12. It's 90 in your packet, 12 in the ordinance. Right above 15 TAC 4F TAC 3 development standards.
Right, got it. A land trust is not a family type, that's not a a
I'm
trust.
misreading that legally? Okay.
Yeah, that, a
That's
land trust has to do with, generally those are like ag properties, different things can be put into different kinds of trusts. So this is a different kind of trust.
Very well.
Sorry, I didn't know, but that's good to know now.
Keeping you on your toes.
Last question, and this may be one for Public Works, and I know we've spoken a bit on this on background, that there is stipulations about the overburdening of utilities, specifically water and sewage. Do we have any sense or any way to measure those effects? I know that obviously we go through a great deal of sewage renovation. Does our sensor map let us know if we're overburdening our systems based on density?
Well, the details, you'll have to discuss that with the Public Works people. However, the Planning Commission was very keen on this. They suggested that we should perform studies in areas that we suspect will be highly impacted, and then based on that, we can use the older parts of the law that hadn't changed in this revision to exclude certain areas if there's a proven, unmitigatable impact or a very high cost impact to sewers, for example. So that's something that we have on the table. But we're not going to be able to get away with a blanket exclusion on that, or even whole areas of the city, without probably some study and some data, which I suspect that can be gathered fairly easily.
Thank you, that's all I've got.
To Chris's point about sewage, sorry, the way it stands now is if you have an ADU on your property, you have to connect it to your main sewer line and your connection to the street. Is it still that way?
No, I think that's that's not allowed to be required any longer.
Okay, so you could, if you lived on a hill on a corner, you could tie in to say like, not your front of house where everything's flowing to the front, but your garage is in back. You can actually run and do a new tie-in.
That's how I understand it, yes.
Okay, but you're not required to do one way or another.
Well, the city is prohibited from requiring it, is what I'm
Okay.
trying to say.
All right.
Any other comments? All right. The public hearing is now open for public input. If anyone would like to speak, you have 5 minutes to speak. Anyone? I think the gentleman at the room back, you had some, did you want? Okay. All right. Seeing no public communication, Mayor, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All right, any council discussion? Oh,
Second.
We vote on that?
do we have to vote on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, council discussion?
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the, I guess penalizing someone with a detached garage currently. Because the way I think about it in practical sense is if your garage is housed inside your house, technically from a bird's eye view, your house may take up more space on the property because the garage is inside there. Whereas if your garage is separate, if you combine the two spaces, it's likely the same amount of lot coverage as before, unless you're dealing with just a box on top of the box.
Right.
Right? And so I understand the thought process behind staff doing that, but I also think I'm staring this down and having PTSD from the Stones who came before the Planning Commission like 4 years ago because they have a 10,000 square foot lot and a big detached garage and they wanted to add an ADU attached to the back of the garage, and this would then tell them that they can only do 800 square feet, where if their garage was attached to their house, they could do 1,200, or, just get rid of your garage and get a 1,200 square foot ADU, and now they have no garage, right? So I understand the thought behind it for trying to limit the mass on a lot, but I am not in favor of anything that promotes somebody eliminating their garage. I think the garage is kind of an integral part of the single-family residential zone. I know how strange that sounds, but,
Right. So, but this is something we do have to pass as far as to meet the state requirements.
we can make
We can make
changes.
changes to it.
Yes.
Is, Or do you, I mean, how many instances would come across that, and do you just do those on like a case by case, handle them case by case?
I guess as a policymaker, I want to try to avoid us getting emails regarding case by case basis things.
Okay.
Just so I understand, okay, the state incentivized, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know, but they incentivized converting garages from the perspective of this parking issue, which was odd again, but that's what they did. And so your proposal would be to, because we can't require, if someone converts a garage, we cannot require them to replace the parking spaces they eliminated or to add one for the ADU, because everything in the city is within 500 or within a half mile of a bus stop. So your proposing would be, I guess that's what I'm asking, what would you propose to deal with that?
I just think if the state law says that you can build a 1,200 square foot ADU, attached, detached, let them do it. Whether they have an attached garage or detached garage doesn't matter to me. Because what I don't want is somebody saying like, okay, well, I still want my 1,200 square foot ADU, so I'm just going to eliminate my 2-car garage and back. And really, to Greg's point, if they do that, that ADU is now inside the setback, most likely, because that garage is probably built on a 0 lot line. Whereas if we just say, hey, you can do 1,200 square feet and you can be attached to the garage if you want to, or you can be detached from that detached structure, they still have to be outside of the setbacks on a new ADU, correct? So if they want to convert their garage, they still can, but then they're limited to 1,200 square feet of total structure.
Yeah, that's certainly an option to consider. But if you do that, what could happen is somebody could keep their garage, not convert their garage, detached garage. You allow 1,200 square feet, and they turn around in 6 months and want to convert their garage, and now you have a 1,600 square foot or 1,700 square foot.
But they're not allowed that much. They're not allowed that much, are they?
But they're required to. They're allowed for the conversion.
Because the junior ADU has to be part of the main house.
It's an interesting scenario. There's two competing bits of the law that we'd have to weigh. One is that says that the maximum ADU is 1,200 square feet, and the other is that you can convert existing structures. So I think that in this case, since they have an ADU that is 1,200 square feet, they're capped out, and we would not allow them to convert the rest of the garage to make it a huge ADU. That's how I would approach that. But there are similar scenarios that could play out when you're not quite capped, and that would be problematic, yes.
I guess the whole concept of the setback, keeping a dwelling, say
Yep.
in our town, it's 10% the width of the lot, not to exceed 6 feet, right?
Well, if I may, ADUs have a different.
And what are their setbacks?
4 feet.
4 feet.
Unless they're conversions.
But now, is that 4 feet? Is that like so fire can't jump from one house to another? Is there what's the rationale?
I have no idea what their rationale is.
Do you know what the rationale is for the setbacks currently? Side yard setbacks for, say, R1 zone?
There's some theory that it's related to fires jumping, but I think that there's probably just as much of an argument that it was put there for aesthetic purposes. Privacy, yeah.
Got it. I guess I just have concerns of, I've owned 2 houses in town now that have, part of the, wall between me and my neighbor is their garage.
Yeah.
And if that is that's a dwelling unit. There's now a window.
No windows.
No windows.
No.
So no emergency egress?
Not on that side. It'd have to be somewhere else. So the bedroom would have to be arranged, if it's not just one room, would have to be arranged in such a way that they could meet the building codes on that. But those buildings that are within, I believe, 2 feet of a property line, it may be 3, I don't remember, but they can't have windows or doors or vents. And that's related to fire safety.
I guess I'm just not a fan of telling somebody with a detached garage the only way they're getting 1,200 square feet is if they convert their garage.
Can I ask this? Can you scroll back to those scenarios again? Because I will confess that this argument is totally marine-proofed. because I've lost the thread on this incentive piece. Can you explain this to
Your house.
Rifleman
Right now,
Pimentel?
okay, I'll put it simple for you, Chris. Your house, you have an attached garage. Your garage is housed within your property.
Yes.
You are allowed by this ordinance to build a 1,200 square foot ADU in your backyard.
Yes.
Okay, now you've been to my old house.
Yes.
I had a detached garage in back.
Yes.
I, in that scenario, would only be allowed to build an 800 square foot ADU detached from my house unless I want, and if I wanted 1,200 square
In
feet.
addition to your garage.
In addition to my garage. But if I wanted a 1,200 square foot ADU, I would need to convert that garage square footage to get my 1,200 square feet.
And this is to guard against overly dense properties in extraneous buildings, right?
Yes, and if I may, I've also been to that house, and I don't think you could possibly squeeze a 1,200 square foot ADU in that property, even with the garage conversion. So, but the reason I say that is because that's a more typical situation of what we have in the city. A lot of this is going to be controlled just by the lot size, how big the house is already. It was our opinion as staff that this would somewhat just self-regulate. There are exceptions, like you mentioned, I think it was the Stones that came to the Planning Commission. They have a very large property with a very large garage. They could convert 1,200 square feet of that garage if they wanted to, or, if it was 1,000 square feet, add 200 also. So they have options. So when we were looking at the big picture, we were just trying to address what we consider to probably be the most likely and egregious impact, which would be if you try to squeeze a 1,200 square foot ADU into that yard, because it's going to be big. It's going to be 2 stories. It's going to be as close to the property lines as you can get. That is probably more impactful to the neighbors in a negative way than telling somebody they have to stop at 800 square feet because they've already got these other structures. That was our thought process.
And that makes perfect sense. I may not agree with it, but it makes perfect sense.
Well, like I said, this is an area that we can change at your direction and not jeopardize our approval from HCD.
Thoughts?
I mean, at this juncture, I feel like we need to move forward. Did you want to make an amendment to the ordinance?
I mean, there's this other thought that I have that we've spent more time talking about this than it's actually going to be in effect before the state changes it again on us.
Yeah.
And so, I just think that it's important that we talk these things through every time we amend these resolutions, because the state law is changing constantly. And, I guarantee staff is fielding questions at the counter that, someone's like, no, I read this. And it's like, yeah, but the state changed 2 laws since you read that. So I don't know. Planning Commission voted 5-0 on it. Do we know? 4-0? Was everybody there?
I'm trying to remember if everybody was there. I think one was missing, but it was unanimous otherwise.
Okay. Well then, Carol, I'm not willing to amend it then. I'll just leave it. I'll leave it alone.
I'll move approval. This is
Second.
I'm sorry, it's just a reading.
No,
Excuse me.
sorry.
This is just a reading.
Okay.
Excuse me.
We
Excuse me.
have to. All right.
First reading. My apologies.
City Attorney will read the ordinance by title only.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, an ordinance amending Title 15 of the El Segundo Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units to comply with state law is ready for introduction.
Who will introduce the ordinance?
I will.
This will be placed in front of the council at the February 3rd council meeting for
February
4th council meeting for potential adoption.
All right. All right, item number 15. The same script, right?
4th. Next page.
This is the time and place hereto fixed for a public hearing. To continue the public hearing regarding the zone text amendment, creating a pilot program to allow and regulate short-term rentals in the city's residential zoning districts through a short-term rental permit program. This item will be continued to the regular city council meeting on February 4th, 2020. So we're not having a discussion about it. Sorry, guys in the back. You've been waiting all this time. You learned something. All right, staff presentations. Approve and authorize the city manager to sign a successor agreement with the South Bay Regional Public Communications Authority, SBRPCA, to continue to provide the city emergency police and fire dispatch services. Chief Whalen and Chief Donovan will be presenting.
Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. As noticed, with me tonight is the Fire Chief, Chief Donovan. Also, to my left here is Eric Lee, the Executive Director of the South Bay Regional Public Communications Authority, which for the remainder of my presentation, I'm going to refer to them how we all do, which is RCC, Regional Communications Center. And as noted, we're here to ask for authorization to enter into a new 10-year agreement with the RCC to provide police and fire dispatching services. So a little bit about the RCC. It's a joint powers authority. It's owned by the cities of Gardena, Hawthorne, and Manhattan Beach. We are a contract city with them, as well as the cities of Culver City and the city of Hermosa Beach. From 1977 to 2000, that was when we were original members of the RCC. And in the late 1990s, approaching 2000, there was concerns about aging infrastructure and other things with the RCC that prompted the leadership at that time to want to strike out on their own and build a new dispatch center, which was housed here at the city of El Segundo. So that occurred in 2000, and at the time that was a $2.8 million cost to build the facility and an additional $2.5 million to acquire the equipment, with an expected life expectancy of 10 to 15 years. And I can tell you that at that time, I don't believe they anticipated the transition to digitally encrypted radios or some of the CAD RMS stuff that we're dealing with now. So I suspect that equipment replacement would have far exceeded $2.5 million had we stayed with that dispatch center. The model at the time was premised on other agencies joining us. We knew that there wasn't, it was not a cost effective to be solo in providing those dispatch services. So we were hoping for economies of scale. We were hoping at that time for other cities to join on board. Hermosa Beach initially came over, but 3 years later they went back to the RCC. RCC went through a modernization, got new equipment, and no other agencies left. No other agencies came with us. So now it's approaching 2010 when our annual budget at that point in time was $2.1 million. So it just was not cost effective, and the direction from council at the time was to negotiate with the Regional Communications Center to join back in as a contract city. At the time that analysis was done, in 5 years' time, the cost to run our own dispatch center was projected to be $2.8 million. And it's not just simply the money issue. It's like everything else when you have another division in a department. It's hiring people, it's making sure staffing levels are met. If staffing levels aren't met, you're paying overtime, it's mandatory fills. There's a whole litany of things that go with running a dispatch center besides just simply a budgeted cost. So at the time, we negotiated with the RCC, and we entered into a 10-year agreement with them to coincide with our fiscal year, so it was October 2010. And that's what brings us to you today, because that contract that we entered in then is now expiring at the end of our current fiscal year. So what's occurred with the RCC since then is they have had asks from other cities to join them, and they knew that cities such as ours were coming up upon contract expiration. And so they contracted with a company that does cost analysis specifically for dispatch centers to come up with what would be a more equitable way of billing the cities, whether they're contract or member cities, to provide these services. And so that occurred at the beginning of this year, and we received the results of that survey or that analysis, which showed that we, based on today's dollars, we're underpaying to the tune of about $480,000 for what we receive in dispatch services. And Eric Lee's with me. He's going to get into, with his presentation, more detail about how that costing analysis took place. I will say that at that point is when we entered into negotiations with the RCC, with Eric Lee, to talk about what this means for us moving forward. And I will say it's been a very collaborative effort in this negotiation process. I think everybody came to the table with honest intentions and really trying to solve this problem, because as you know, that's a significant amount of money if we were to come to you and say next year's budget is going up by $480,000. And so what we were able to negotiate out of that, the primary part of it, and I'm going to let the fire chief speak to some nuances related to the fire service, is we were able to attain a 4-year phase-in approach to this cost increase. And that's significant, and I'll say it's significant because as I'm standing in front of you tonight, there's other chiefs of police standing in front of their councils who were told they're overpaying by a significant amount of money. And they're in a zero net, they can't make money, they can't lose money. So in order for a city to take a decrease, we have to take an increase. So as we phase this in over 4 years, other people are phasing down what they're paying over 4 years. And so really everybody is a team player in this. Everybody wants this to succeed, and so everybody's trying to do their part to make sure that this works. We looked at, and I'm speaking specifically to the police department side of this now because that's what I'm representing up here, but we looked at other options. And one option would be to open a new dispatch center. Staff does not recommend that option, just simply due to the costs involved. The trend in the industry right now is to go towards regional models. There are many cities in the South Bay that are looking to regionalize and get out of the dispatch game altogether. But if you look at, I reached out to the city of Redondo Beach, and their budget this year is $2.8 million for their dispatch center. And they're similar in scope to what we would be looking at doing a fire and police dispatch center. And you could see that that is significantly more than what our increase will be in the first year of this contract. And I'm going to back up a minute. So our contract, the actual increase in cost will not occur until our next budget year that you'll have in front of you come this summer. There is no cost this year. We just need the authority now so that we can enter into the agreement. It's also important to note that this agreement, while taking place on July 1st, they are actually crediting us the first quarter of that contract, recognizing that our current contract does go through October. So the first year of this contract will have a decrease representing what we would be paying under our existing contract. Another option would be to look for other opportunities to partner with other cities to provide dispatch services. There are no cities that we could find that are interested in entertaining that conversation with us. Again, I mentioned that there are tremendous challenges with running a dispatch center. To bring on the extra staffing needed to police our city was not something they were desirous of, and many of those cities are in fact looking to regionalize as well. So for that reason, we don't believe that is an option. So from a police department standpoint, my recommendation is to you is that you allow us to enter into this agreement with the Regional Communications Center for providing these services. And with that, I'll turn it over to the fire chief to talk to fire-specific issues.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, thank you. You know, the negotiations that took place included Finance Director Joe Lilio, myself, Chief Wellen, and Executive Director Lee, who will be brought up here in a moment. And part of the negotiations, cost was certainly a factor, but service was also a conversation piece. And we worked hard to make sure that we could provide the same level or preferably increase our service delivery from a performance perspective while also maintaining costs to the best of our ability. And the costs are presented here for your consideration. One of the things that needs to be considered and talked about is the performance piece of this. And this is a very technical service delivery. It's very detailed. There's a lot of very analytical parts and pieces that go into police and fire dispatching. And I will tell you that with the new executive director, RCC is making strides towards improving their service delivery. And I'm happy to report that they have been open-minded to looking at and studying internally their service delivery model. And we have seen some improvements to their service as it relates to the fire dispatch piece of the Police Fire Dispatch Center. And so I do want to acknowledge the efforts they're taking moving forward. We wanted to build into this contract more performance minded approaches. And so the contract for fire includes National Fire Protection Administration or NFPA standards that are recognized standards for call processing time. That is the time that a 911 caller from the field somewhere in their home or on the street and a cell phone calls the 911 center to the time that the dispatcher answers the call, processes the call, and then dispatches the fire resources, there are standards that are associated with that. And Director Lee was open-minded to including those into our contract, and so that will be part of our fire performance piece moving forward. And we'll be working with staff at RCC to continually be mindful and put a sharp eye on the performance side as it relates to fire dispatching. Quite frankly, though, there are other options. Unlike the police department, fire, we have other options available to us. And so we've been open and honest in our conversations with RCC about those potential options for fire dispatching. And this contract does contemplate the ongoing conversations that 7 of the fire chiefs in the region, the fire chiefs of Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Culver City, El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, and Torrance, the 7 fire chiefs and their staff are studying a regional dispatch center. So this contract contemplates as an option the potential of an opt-out clause. And there is performance side of this, so if they are able to perform to a certain level, then there'll be a cost to opt out. If they're not performing to a certain level, based on the timing of our potential departure, there would be no opt-out fee associated with it. So I just want to bring it to your attention that we'll be working collaboratively with RCC staff to continue to improve the performance from that dispatch center, but we're also looking at other options that may be available to us. And as that transaction takes place and as those conversations take place, we'll certainly keep you updated as to the status. And at some point, there'll be certainly a conversation that will be taking place from a policy decision as to whether it will be in the best interest of the El Segundo Fire Department to leave RCC to join a regional fire dispatch center that would be comprised of those 7 departments. For the time being, though, we're focused on our efforts with RCC, and we're focused on continuing the conversations on the cost side of the house, which has been negotiated and is before you for consideration, but also the ongoing efforts of analytics and performance that will be important from our service delivery. So with that, Director Lee is here, and he does have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'd like to invite him up to provide some more information, and at the conclusion, we'll all be available for any comments or questions you may have. Director Lee.
Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. I am Eric Lee. I'm the Executive Director of the RCC. I'm happy to be in front of you this evening. As just a little bit of background on our agency, as Chief Whalen mentioned, we are a joint powers agency that is owned by the cities of Gardena, Hawthorne, and Manhattan Beach. What that means is we have a board of directors, which is comprised of a city council member from each of those 3 cities that provides the policy guidance for the agency. And we also have an administrative governing body made up of the city managers of each of those 3 cities that handle the routine administration and implementation of that policy. We're a full functioning unit of local government. We have our own finance department. We do our own payroll. Unlike some joint powers agencies that cities develop to accomplish certain means and implement on a in-kind basis or with existing sitting staff. We have 72 employees. We have our workers' comp insurance. We have CalPERS that we need to pay. And so we are a fully functional unit of local government. As was mentioned earlier, we recently did a cost study. And that cost study, we hired an outside consultant that has expertise in municipal finance and has a long track record and also working with dispatch centers. And in that, part of the direction to go to do this study was for our 3 contract cities, which are Culver City, El Segundo, and Hermosa Beach. The contracts differ on how costs are escalated year after year, and we wanted to develop a uniform approach on how costs are handled. We also have a request from the city of Redondo Beach for a quote, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing an apples-to-apples comparison as we're considering expanding with another city. And our member cities, they also wanted to review costs among themselves and make sure that the most updated information was being used and that everyone was getting a fair deal. as far as methodology the consultant used, they met extensively with our staff, our member cities, and our contract cities to understand the good, bad, and the ugly about the agency and where all the stakeholders felt the costs were coming from. Additionally, they looked at cost allocation models from other comparable agencies. They analyzed all the data and they developed a really comprehensive data model for us, along with 31 recommendations on how they think that we need to move forward, not just with a new formula, but how we need to administer that formula on an ongoing basis. In short, the result of the cost allocation study was a cost allocation policy that was adopted by our board of directors over the summer that ties costs as closely as possible to the services that are actually being provided to our 6 cities. So those are broken down into phone calls, both 911 calls and non-emergency calls that the dispatch center handles, the actual dispatch services that are dedicated to each city, a surge capacity allocation that accounts for the fact that we are a consolidated regional center, and sometimes agencies, they need mutual aid partners, automatic aid partners, and our ability to scale up to meet that demand from a dispatch side was accounted for. We also do vehicle upfitting, which is a fancy term for putting the radios and the computers in a police car or a fire truck, along with all the safety equipment associated with that. And so we do that in-house at our facility in Hawthorne. And of course, as I mentioned, we are a full functioning unit of local government, and we do have administrative overhead that is charged out. As a result of this study, there were a number of cities that were targeted for increases and a number of cities with decreases. And so El Segundo and Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach to some extent were the ones that were targeted most for increases. And so this table here illustrates our current fiscal year 1920 budget if we were to take the current assessment, which is what is in our budget, against our modeled assessment, which is what the new cost formula transforms that to. This is what that the formula says our cities are either over or underpaying. And as Chief Whelan mentioned, the city of El Segundo came out as underpaying by $479,000. Conversely, the cities of Gardena and Hawthorne were determined to be overpaying, and Culver City, was about even. Hermosa and Manhattan Beach, we have similar issues with El Segundo in the sense that we've got well over double-digit increases year over year of changes, which means if we would implement this new formula right away in fiscal year 2021, El Segundo would conceivably be looking at a 35% increase in this fee, which is significant. And so just a little background on the current agreement that expires this summer that we have with El Segundo. It's a 10-year agreement. It started out at $1.1 million, and our current 1920 assessment for El Segundo is just under $1.4 million. And so that shows you how, with the cost policy model at 1.85, where the difference of $479,000 is. So, as the chiefs mentioned, we met extensively to negotiate a new agreement. And one of the principal concerns from the city side was how are we going to overcome a 35% increase immediately? And so we agreed to implement the new policy with phasing over 4 years, and also preserve the legacy policy costing in Q1 of this next fiscal year. We did look for a 10-year term. There are performance standards, especially on the fire side, that really are helping us to focus where we need to improve service delivery and justify service delivery, and there's out clauses for the fire department if we can't deliver. And we also changed some administrative aspects on late payment on invoices. So in short, the $479,000 is being broken over 4 years, and so the fiscal year 2021, there's an annual cap of almost $1.5 million. That goes up to 1.7 the following year, almost 1.9 in 22-23, and then on the fourth year, it's a little over $2 million. As it relates to fiscal impact, not to give you some death by chart, but I did want to show you how this is working. If you look at the highlighted sections, essentially total under proposed agreement are those numbers that I just explained to you that would be cost to the city of El Segundo. That lower line, projected discount provided by the RCC members, this is the impact of the 4-year phasing on our member agencies at the RCC. So essentially there's a $400,000 discount in year 1, and that decreases year over year for a 4-year total of $828,000. And so in summary, there's in years 1 through 4, it's almost a 10% increase year over year for the city that's being proposed in this agreement. In the out years of the contract, the city would be subject to the full cost allocation policies adopted by our board of directors. There are those deficits that total $828,000 that are essentially being credited as discounts to the city, and they're going to be made up by our member cities, either as premiums that we charge to them on an annual basis, or if we've got available reserves, we might appropriate that. That decision has not been made yet. And that concludes my presentation. I'm sure you've got some questions, and I'm happy to answer anything that I can.
So I just have one quick question. So as when it comes to the cost modeling, are you treating the contract cities different than the owner cities?
No. So it's the formula is the same. The cost policy does have a provision about adding, I think it's called a cost adjustment surcharge to contract cities. It's something that it's the consultant considered as allowable, but our board of directors has not implemented that at this time.
Okay. And then you're saying that you have intention of trying to bring on additional contract cities?
Yes, we're in the process. We just did a phase 1 feasibility study for the city of Palos Verdes Estates, and we're looking, we just got direction this afternoon from our governing body to do phase 2 of that study. We hope to have that done early summer. And we're looking to do a phase 1 study with Redondo Beach, and we hope to have that done in February.
So as you bring these new cities on, do you feel that there's going to be like a cost easing, like would it, like the cost to bring them on and to offer the service would bring down the total cost for everybody else,
Correct. So previously under the old contracts, they were individual contracts with the authority, and if the authority had additional clientele or revenues that was, it was shared among the owner cities. Under the new cost policy, when additional cities are brought on, or conversely, if a city leaves, we need to redo that policy to make sure that everyone's paying their full freight. So if we did bring on additional cities, our central costs are spread over a larger base, and all cities, member cities and contract cities would benefit.
You know, I'll throw in some of this on background. The wisdom for running our own dispatch center was principally based on service. And I think that we would have a lot more concern if we had seen a diminution of service, but clearly our response times by every metric we see as we audit our police and fire remain very high. So in that regard, I think we're very happy with this. I think, though, the statistical modeling or the methodology used by the consultant is where I think that we have a bit of an issue in that it seems to overburden cities that have their own fire department. I mean, you can clearly see that's where the sharing of the administrative recharge seems to factor in the fire using cities more. And so my concern would be the number of service calls seem disproportionately high. And so I would ask, is that factoring in all the line tests and every non-emergency call for fire, or are those just when we get trucks on the road?
So the fire, you are correct. In aggregate, the formula is it impacts agencies with fire departments more, and that's because the previous model really was agnostic to police or fire. It was just calls for service or a bucket of calls for service, and that's how it was allocated. And so you are correct in that analysis. Yeah, as it relates to the types of calls that are being charged to the fire dispatching component of the formula, we are including all types of calls that the dispatchers handle. And so there's a number of calls, specifically in El Segundo, that relate to fire alarm testing, where my understanding is the city has a quite robust fire prevention program, and the commercial property owners know that if they're doing tests on their alarms, they do need to call us. We manage that to make sure that if for some reason we get an alarm activation during that time, that fire units aren't dispatched. Those are accounted for in the model, not only for El Segundo, but also for Manhattan Beach and Culver City, which are our 3 fire departments. And so there are types of calls that your firefighters are not responding to. They're being included in the formula. However, that is being handled across the board with all 3 of our fire departments. And so it's not that El Segundo is getting tagged for items where the other cities are not. Everyone's getting tagged for those types of items.
It just appears by the numbers, because there are, there's, between 2 cities here, there's 150,000 police calls for service. And fire calls for service, the grand total of all 3 fire cities is like 10,000 calls. So it would seem like that a fire call punches above its body weight in terms of the cost allocations or recharges. I mean, is that a fair?
So you're clearly you're seeing additional cost, and it's being driven by the fact that we are accounting for that. I would offer that we're charging that out because we actually have FTEs that we're staffing at fire positions. And so it's not like there's some stats where we're taking buckets of other resources and charging it to fire. We have a fire dispatching pod, and there are FTEs sitting in there 24/7, 365, and we want to make sure we're allocating the cost for those FTEs to our 3 fire departments in the most equitable manner possible.
Well, I appreciate you, because I was anticipating my next question, so I appreciate you addressing that. Are we tying the fire calls to the big bucket of recharge, or are we tying them to fire calls for service with an equivalent line to it? So I appreciate it. I think outside of this conversation, that's something that, as we measure in our total cost of service for as being a full-service city, that's something that we need to be measuring, that when we do, the cost of fire is higher than the cost of police in terms of this specific aspect. But that's little to do with you. That's a budgeting question for us as we go forward. That lines up all of my questions on this. So over to you, Madam Pro Tem.
Scott?
I don't have any questions. I'm good.
Okay.
I guess our next question will be for planning. Can we use our dispatch for an ADU, or is that only short-term rental?
I think it's short-term rented right now to the DEA.
Only if it's a detached facility.
If it's detached.
It's attached, and it's 1,200 square feet, give or take.
Well, thank you for coming and presenting, and we're really appreciative that you've come aboard and you are improving the service. And did you guys have anything else to say? No?
I think it's a testament to the level of service they provide that the vast number of our residents still think it's being performed right here.
Yeah.
Which I think that the dispatchers, the number of calls they get that say like, hey, I'm 3 blocks to the left of you, is probably pretty high.
And I know we've done a really good job trying not to spend money. We've been fiscally prudent across the board, but I can almost guarantee if I ask 10 residents in town, 911 says it's going to cost more money, should we spend the money? I think they're going to all say yes. So I think just providing that safety and that component to the residents is very important. And the cost is the cost. This isn't something we chose. It is what it is, and we have to provide the service. So with that, I'll move for approval on this item.
Do we need to make approval on this one? Okay. Do you want
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Chief, if we can find a way in our fire code, Chief Donovan, to add some automation to our line testing that doesn't involve someone actually having to pick up and know there's a line test coming, that seems like it would 10 years from now pay some cost dividends to us.
I did have one question. I know, since I'm sitting in this chair, Drew would ask, can we see the KPIs, on a quarterly basis to?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
I was in the 2x2 with Drew, and yeah, he let him know.
Okay. Thank you.
You didn't get briefed on this? Oh, I got.
We already have those the response numbers.
Oh no, we didn't get the response times.
All right. Item number D, committees, commissions, and board representatives. I don't see any here. Reports, city clerk.
Nothing this evening.
City treasurer, not here. City Council members, Mr. Pimentel.
Yeah, a few items. I know we have put in our solid waste piece, we've focused on trying to hit some calorie cycle numbers, and I think that it's sometimes easy to forget that a portion of our city is in the sanitation district, and those recycle numbers are robust. So I want to read some of these off as I took notes from the last meeting, that as a sanitation district, just for December, we had 2 billion gallons of wastewater reused, 79,000 tons of solid waste reused, 37 megawatt hours produced from solid waste, which is, if you factor that in, you could run all the residences in El Segundo for 3 months based on that. So I think those are solid. We used 200 tons of solid waste per day in December, so that's a record for the sanitation district. So when you factor those in, there's sort of bizarre numbers to put in, but you factor that based upon the recycle numbers we do from our residential quarter. That is a solid effort by the citizens and residents here, and I had a funny repartee back and forth about whether or not this was plastic straw inclusive. It seems like we do a pretty good job either way. 90% of a vehicle fleet, mind you, in the sanitation district are powered by natural gas as well and biodiesel. Other than that, we have big things coming in. I'll throw in, I'm going to steal a piece from the mayor just for the COG pieces, that the homeless initiative and dealing with LAWA on a regional basis, and some of our public works and metro and transit pieces are all in process there, and we'll have a big meeting on Thursday to weigh those. So there'll be an update in the February meeting on the outcomes of those. That's all.
Can I ask you a question from the sanitation?
Please
Did
do.
they talk about the green waste, composting?
Yeah, that's actually where all that's at the solid waste.
That's
is
the solid waste.
We're running those power plants based on the methane release from that. So that's where that generation comes from.
Because I've been asked a lot by the residents in town about why we can't use biodegradable bags in our green waste bins. Yeah, it's just something that when you said that, I thought to myself, like, oh, that is.
Some of those will be, that is processor dependent. So EDCO's process may not allow for those, a different process. Now, LA, the sanitation district, that's a county facility. That's something that's run from that area. So I don't know what their ability to process those things are, but it all depends on who's handling the end user of your solid waste.
All right, Councilmember Nickel.
I think we have a website launch coming up.
Yes, on the 28th.
The 28th of this month. I hope not everyone in town goes on that website at the same time and crashes it. But this is a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that I believe was originally voted on prior to Chris and I sitting on this dais.
Yes, it was.
I think the RFP went out, and then I think we participated in choosing the vendor. But so it's a long time coming, as it is in city time, but the website is here, and so please visit it and, be kind with your feedback. Everything is a work in progress. Yeah, and that's all I got.
Yeah, and I was just going to bring up the website, and, it's been a long time in coming, and every department has participated in this. And, they've spent a lot of time scrubbing the data, making sure that we have the right information up there. And please, if you do have feedback, just submit it to our Deputy City Manager's office, and we will, take that note. And we're just really pleased and thankful that everyone put the time and effort into it, and we're able to launch January 28th. And that's all I had. All right, now we have City Attorney.
Nothing this evening other than to briefly say that Councilmember Nickel is correct, that Sacramento's already busy working on more housing legislation, so you'll hardly get to digest that before the next stuff comes at you.
And then City Manager.
I'm trying to make sense of that. Madam Mayor, Pro Tem and members of the council, by way of follow-up from comments tonight, the city attorney and I will put our heads together and determine how to respond to the comments from Mr. Jones with respect to Waypoint. We do understand his frustration and predicament, but it really does not involve the city directly. But we just want you to know, and those who are watching on this, that we will we'll strategize and figure out how to communicate on that. By the next council meeting will be on February 4th, and several items are in the works for that. We'll have the second reading of the ADU issue that you just deliberated on, had your first reading. We will have short-term rentals. You made reference to that in continuing the public hearing for that. We'll also have an update on the citywide strategic work plan, the annual review. The finance director and myself will present to you our report card, if you will, our KPIs. And that will be integrated into the website ultimately as well, so the residents can keep track that way. The city attorney talked about legislation. We'll have the first time ever proposed legislative platform in front of the city council that will give us, as your staff, the flexibility and leeway to have letters sent in favor and opposed to legislation that pops up during the year without having to wait to get it on the council calendar. So we think you'll be very pleased with that. And that is a work in progress. That will evolve over time. We will also present to you the fiscal year 18-19 preliminary year-end financial report. So how do we do in the previous fiscal year? Our finance director will give you that report, financially speaking. In addition, we'll have a special presentation on the proposed Smoky Hollow specific plan community policy guidelines. We had initially anticipated bringing that to you tonight. It's not quite ready, and we'll come back to you at the next meeting with that. So
That's defining the community benefit aspects of a development project?
correct, in order to get the ability to have more density or other components of a development proposal. It's a very innovative, creative way of dealing with land use and to encourage redevelopment of that part of town. So that's it by way of follow-up and comments from the city manager. Thank you.
All right, public communication is now open. Seeing none, we'll close public communication. And then do we want to remind people that the election will be coming up in March, that there's an election? March 3rd? And that will close our council meeting.